Hey, Kerry Sullivan here with another howtokickassinsales.com video, and today is all about how to truly compete. So I was just watching this really good interview with one of my favorite all-time coaches, Pete Carroll. And they were talking to him, they're asking him, hey, what's going on with the Seattle Seahawks? What are you guys doing? What's your next thing? And this was just after he came off a Super Bowl victory coaching the Seattle Seahawks. And he said, you know what? We're competing. We're going out there every day. We're looking to get better. And that is the premise of what his whole program and his philosophy in coaching is all about, is competing. And he was talking about how he was watching a TED Talk with Angela Duckworth, and she's someone I've actually talked about on other videos, and she came up with the concept of grit. She didn't come up with the concept of grit, she just labeled it and she studies it. So what is grit? Grit is your stick-to-itiveness, right? And she found that people who have this grit are able to have more success. So she looked at naval cadets going through the West Point Naval Academy, and she found that the #1 success factor in determining how well these cadets did was their stick-to-itiveness. It wasn't their IQ, it wasn't their, I shouldn't say their stick-to-itiveness, it's their grit, as she calls it, but it wasn't their IQ, it wasn't their physical abilities, it was their grit. And she found this as well with spelling bee people as well, who were going out there and winning the national spelling bee or doing really well in the national spelling bee. It was their grit that determined how well they did in the off times that they weren't actually competing in these spelling bees. Specifically, the people that were winning were the ones who were willing to sit down and do the hard studying, actually reading the dictionary and memorizing words versus just reading books or doing something else that would be easier. It was really just putting your head down and just getting it done that way. So what happened though at the end of this TED Talk that Pete Carroll is watching, Angela Duckworth then says, but you can't teach grit. We don't know how to build it. We can't figure out how to do that. And she's an academic, right? So academics don't think that these things can be done. It's one, I love academics, I love studies, but there's always that part of things that they don't really get. And so Pete Carroll saw this and he's like, get her on the phone, because he's like, that's what we do. We teach grit where we are. He's like, get her out here, I'll show her how it's done. And so what he went on to talk about is what competition truly is. So he teaches his guys day in and day out to go and compete against each other. But what happens is you look at in those practices, you'll have linemen lined up against each other just battling, and wide receivers and corners battling every single day, right? And most people look at that and they'll say, that guy won, that guy lost. But that's not the point, as Pete Carroll says. The point and what the original meaning of competition is, as he describes it, is that it is not the winning or losing, but it's the striving for. So it's the striving for someone to get better, right? It's not the winning or the losing. And so what happens is when you have this mindset of that striving to get better as an individual, you no longer hate your competition. You no longer fear your competition. You love your competition, right? You love the adversity, and then you come to embrace it. And so when you come from a mindset of that point, and you come from a place of love, and you relish it, it's a whole other thing, right? It's just a whole other level of motivation. And you can get into all kinds of spiritual concepts with this as well, but it's just something that's really awesome that you can really use to motivate yourself. So how can you use this as a salesperson? Well, look, in sales, you have competition. Maybe it's within your company, maybe it's outside your company, right? Relish that, because it's there and it's what's gonna make you better. Love that, right? And love those nightmare clients and love those people that are telling you no, because it's pushing your skills to the limit and it's teaching you how and making you take your game to the next level, right? That is the essence of competing and being great and thinking like a champion every single day. That's something I've talked about before, about thinking like a champion, right? And what Pete Carroll was talking about right there is not only thinking like a champion, but it's developing that grit. And the beautiful thing about grit, like Pete Carroll was talking about, is that anyone can have that. Anyone can have that stick-to-itiveness, right? It's not something you're born with. It's something you decide to go for, and it's a mindset you can develop, and it's something he's developed with his teams, right? And he's had some great teams. He had some great teams when he was coaching at USC, the USC Trojans, that football team, and obviously, you know, over the past few years, the Seattle Seahawks have been a great football team as well. And that's the kind of nonstop competing that they have really emphasized in the culture, but it teaches that grit. Again, because it's not about winning or losing, it's about striving to be the best you can be. And all the top athletic coaches are all like this, right? You look at the Bill Waltons, right? You look at the New England Patriots with Bill Belichick. You look at the top sports psychologists out there like Lanny Basham, and then you also look at Timothy Gethaway, right? There's lots of other coaches out there like John Calipari, Rick Pitino. These guys, they all have unbelievable track records, but they're not focused in on the winning. They're focused in on being the best they can be, and being the best they can be in that moment, right? And just making every day your masterpiece. And that's a concept that John Wooden talks about, making every day your masterpiece. So that's it. Hey, if you guys have any questions for me, let me know. In the meantime, go out there and compete, and just love your competition and love the adversity you face, because it's making you excellent, it's making you great. And that's how a champion thinks, that's how you develop grit. And if you do that, you're gonna be awesome. Talk to you on the next one. Bye-bye.